Maybe? All right. Well, again, good afternoon. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. My name is Joe Battolini, and I'm a career consultant for Dietrich College at CMU in the Career and Professional Development Center. And we're so happy that you decided to join us for Internship Showcase this January 2021. And my colleague, Kevin Collins, is here as well. Kevin, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Kevin Collins. I'm also a career consultant. I work with computer science undergrads and PhDs in the CPDC. Glad you're all here.
Great, thanks, Kevin. So why are we here today? You probably have read a little bit of this description already for this 1-hour internship showcase session, but just to recap, I'll give you a brief overview of the plan for today and why we're here. So first and foremost, the purpose is to use Internship Showcase for two reasons. One, to explore various job functions, industries, and career opportunities, but also second, to learn how to actually get an internship in your area of interest, from submitting the application to actually getting the offer. And so, of course, we have some great student panelists here today with us who were selected and invited by the Career Center to share their specific experiences from past internships, as well as their efforts and strategies for actually finding and securing those opportunities. So throughout, feel free to put your questions in the chat box as we go through. We're happy to answer questions in real time as students introduce themselves and share their information. Each panelist may be speaking for about 3 to 5 minutes for their slides, so feel free to let us know what questions you have in the chat. So at this point, we will turn it over to Kevin.
Thanks, Joe. And again, welcome and thank you all for attending. Before I introduce the panel, I want to remind everyone that if you haven't done so already, it would be a good idea to schedule an appointment with your career consultant. We can assist in helping you with craft a search strategy, as well as to assist you in identifying strengths of the candidate. An appointment can be made right on Handshake. So without further delay, let me introduce our student panelists for this afternoon. Adriana Martinez is a CIT senior majoring in electrical and computer engineering. Michelle Chen is a Tepper senior majoring in business administration. Juliette Wong is an MCS senior majoring in mathematical sciences. Manish Nagareddy is a Dietrich sophomore majoring in statistics and machine learning. And Jake Felgoys is a science and humanities scholar senior majoring in policy and management. Each of these panelists will do a brief presentation about their internship experiences, including where they worked, their major roles and responsibilities, selected projects, critical skills needed for success, etc. If you have any questions for any of the panelists, as Joe said, we ask that you post these in the chat. After all the panelists have done their presentations, we will then pass along any unanswered questions to the student panel. If your question pertains to a particular student panelist, please indicate that in your question. So now let me ask Adriana to get things started. Adriana?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. So as Kevin just mentioned, my name's Adriana. I had the pleasure of being an intern at Google for the past 2 years. I started off by interning as a STEP intern the summer of 2019, and I was in Seattle, Washington. And then after that, I was able to convert to a SWE summer intern for 2020. Now, to basically summarize what that is, STEP is a freshman and sophomore year program at Google designed to work as a introduction to software engineering. So that was my first internship to really get to know what it would be like to work as a software engineer at Google. And both of these internships included programming projects that were heavily related to what my team was working on. And once I've completed the STEP internship, I was able to convert to a software engineer intern for the following summer, which ended up being remote because of coronavirus, obviously. But a really interesting fact that I often like to tell people when they ask me like, oh, how did you get your internship at Google, is that I actually applied for the STEP internship program my freshman year, but I was rejected. And there was no hard feelings. I moved on, I applied elsewhere, and they actually contacted me the following year asking me to apply again and to set up an interview. So that was actually my way in from a failed application process to being contacted the following year to go ahead and try again. And the really cool part about the STEP internship was that you got to work with another intern. So there was like 2 interns working on a similar project. So you're not alone and you have all of that guidance and resources. And for the following summer, since I was already an intern at Google, I did not have to interview again in order to get my return internship offer. And it was all based on my manager feedback, which I thought was really nice. Go ahead, next slide. So more on the technical aspect of my internship. In order for me to go through the whole process, it started out with a coding challenge. And then after that, you move on to the actual interview processes, which for me was 2 technical interviews, which consisted of whiteboarding, of just like solving a coding question on a whiteboard or on a Google Docs. And then once you pass all of those interviews, I went ahead and started the team matching phase. And the team matching phase is something that I've found to be quite unique at Google. You have the opportunity to speak to potential managers and learn about the available projects that they have. So the recruiter puts you in contact with a couple of the managers who are looking to host interns, and you get to talk to them and ask them questions. And it's essentially a 2-sided interview. You're interviewing them to see if you would want to potentially work with them, and they're interviewing you to see if they would want to hire you. There's nothing too technical about these interviews. They're more like informal talks. And you're able to essentially get matched with a team that you're both interested in each other, essentially. For me specifically, I ended up doing both of my internships in different parts of the Google Ads atmosphere. And one thing that I found really cool about Google is that they have their own internal tools. And what I mean by this is that they have their own version control. So they don't really use the, tools like GitHub or Git or anything like that. They use these tools that were created at Google for Google products. And they also have their own IDEs, which you can use outside IDEs as well, or you can use your own. And then simple things like pull requests, they're also called different. So I just thought that was really unique, is that everything that you really do at Google is Google specific. So I thought that was pretty neat. And a little bit more about the work that I did for my software engineering internship. I had 2 big projects, and the first one involved visibility into how site traffic is split across user interactions. So when a user clicks, it was essentially trying to track these user interactions and how that was being affected in traffic and like all of the errors that went along with it, so you could better navigate when things are failing. And then one of my second big project involved JavaScript part file bundling, which essentially allows us to reduce the number of exception rates that we obtain whenever we're trying to load up a page, for example. That's just a broad level, some of the technical aspects that I worked on. Next slide. So yeah, for this slide, I just had some general advice. I think the most general advice I could come up with is to polish your resume. Make sure it is clear and easy to read, just because recruiters are often looking at many resumes for a long periods of time. So if yours is not easy on the eyes, it would be easier to like pass and not move forward with it. And anyone can really apply. They have a variety of opportunities for technical and non-technical students. So I've had friends from all types of majors apply and be interns at Google. And Google takes pride in looking for passionate students and often encourages students from non-traditional backgrounds to apply. So this often means students not in like CS or not in ECE. It could be anybody from all types of backgrounds, which I really enjoyed. Yeah, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Adriana. And again, if anybody has questions for Adriana and about her experience, feel free to include those in the chat box. And of course, we'll have time to answer a little bit later as well. So thank you so much, Adriana. All right, and next up we have Michelle Chen. Michelle, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm Michelle. I'm currently a senior. I'm majoring in business and minoring in design. And this past summer, I interned at Blizzard Entertainment as a UX/visual design intern. Just to introduce Blizzard a bit, if you haven't heard of them, they're a video game company and they've made like Overwatch, Diablo, World of Warcraft. And for the recruitment process for a user experience design intern, it's really three main stages. So the first stage was just a call with the recruiter. It was super basic. We talked about my background, why I got interested in design since business is my main major. We talked about my past experiences for internships and also just a little bit about how I work within a team. The second interview was then with the actual team I ended up working on, which was the World of Warcraft game site team. And that interview was both behavioral and technical. So I was interviewed by the three other designers on the team, and we talked about my past projects in detail, like how I think through design problems, the whole design process, how I go through each stage, and then behavioral wise, how I work on a multidisciplinary team with like developers or PMs. And then after that, there was a design challenge, and each design challenge is really tailored for the role. So each design intern got a different one when I talked to the other design interns. And since I was interested in visual/interaction design, mine was really visually focused. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned before, I worked on the World of Warcraft game site team, and the main thing that I did during the summer was I was in charge of the creative development of a feature that's scheduled to ship early 2021. And throughout this internship, I learned a lot. You can see on the left here, that's the current website. And there's a lot of skeuomorphic elements, and that's basically like 3D elements and components. And so we actually utilize Photoshop a lot so that we can use textures and different shapes to create all these different, on the right, you can see like these buttons or these image placeholders. And that was definitely something unique about this internship because not every company uses Photoshop as a design tool. And we did use like Figma and Sketch, but that's more for low fidelity stuff. And in terms of soft skills, I collaborated with the other designers, engineers, PMs, and editors. So that was really great to have that multi-perspective when it came to designing, especially for the user. And also having that business background was great too. When I did talk to like PMs and hear from their side, maybe we should add this or remove this from the design because this would help the business. Next slide, please. So I think moving forward, something that I wish I heard when I was searching for internships was first, in terms of your portfolio, I think something that really helped was having a related game industry project, because that was actually something that was asked in detail about during my interview. And then also, I think having that project really showed that I was passionate and somewhat knowledgeable in the industry before getting the internship. And so if you're interested in Blizzard or any other industry, maybe having 1 or 2 projects related to that field is really great. And then the second thing that I feel like is really important, especially at Blizzard, since it's such a people first company, it's to always be able to talk to a variety of different people to understand how roles work together, and also showing that you're a good communicator, that when you get feedback, whether it's design feedback or just general feedback, you're able to implement that into what you're doing and also as a professional. Yeah, so that's pretty much all from me.
Thanks, Michelle. Juliette, I believe you're up next.
Hi, my name is Juliette Wong. I'm a senior at CMU studying mathematical sciences with a concentration in operations, research, and statistics. I have 2 minors, one in human-computer interaction and the other one in Chinese studies. and my career interest is in data analytics or data science, specifically in the financial services industry. So this past summer, I worked as a summer technology analyst at Citi, and the way I got my role was pretty unique. So my sophomore spring, I participated in something known as Citi's Early ID program. It's a 5-week program that focuses on diversity. I specifically was part of the Women's Leadership Program, and through that, I was paired with a female mentor who was a technology analyst at Citi. And she gave me a lot of tips. We did mock interviews and resume reviews, and I also learned a lot about what she does at work. And through that program, she referred me to basically skip all the initial interview stages, and instead of going through all the different interview stages, I only had 1 hour-long final round interview. Next slide, please. So my internship was supposed to be 10 weeks long and in person, but unfortunately due to COVID, it was shortened to 5 weeks long. Usually you get to work on one project throughout the whole entire course of the internship, but because they decided to shorten the internship, we ended up doing 4 different sprints. Each sprint was a week long, and the first week was mostly we learned about Citi, and then the second week we learned basic data essentials using Python and Power BI. The third week we learned about the cloud, specifically the public cloud using AWS. The fourth week we learned UI UX and basic security, and then the 5th week we learned about production support. So for each of these weeks and each of these sprints, we worked on a small project with a group of 3 to 4 other interns that were also in technology at Citi from all different locations. And at the end of the week, we would present these really small projects to upper management and get a lot of feedback. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the internship position. In the morning, we would spend time doing different trainings, and in the afternoons, we would spend times in our group working on these projects so we could present by the end of the week. On top of that, we were given junior and senior mentors. So the junior mentor is an analyst in technology, so someone who just graduated and was working within like 1 to 2 years after graduation. Senior mentors were usually senior vice presidents. So there's someone who have a lot more experience in the field and can kind of give you a good overview about career trajectory at Citi. On top of that, we had manager meet and greets and senior speakers about twice a week. So it was a really good way to learn about all the different teams and all the different management positions at Citi. In terms of career advice, for sophomores who are interested in working at Citi, I would definitely suggest that you participate in the Early ID program. There are a lot of different positions available, so it's not just limited to technology. I know a lot of CMU students in TEPRS go into like investment banking or corporate finance, and they have early ID programs for that as well. If you don't go through that and you do the normal interview process, the normal interview consists of basic programming, database management systems, finance questions, and brain teasers. One thing that they did tell everyone was that financial knowledge is not required. So you don't need to have any finance classes taken before you apply for this internship, but it is highly encouraged because there is a lot of financial jargon once you start your internship. So it's definitely helpful to know a little bit of financial knowledge. Finally, I would definitely suggest to learn how to network with the people you meet during the internship if you do intern at Citi. You can definitely ask your junior and senior mentors to give you contact information of other analysts or other people working at Citi, and so you can learn a lot about the different teams available once you work there. And that's it.
Thanks, Juliette. Appreciate it. Next, we have Manish.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So hi, guys. My name is Manish. I am a sophomore in statistics and machine learning in StatML. I also just declared my minor in CS, working towards the double major. And I worked at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So this is an executive government agency, a federal agency that focuses on responsible finance practices from all the big banks and basically any consumer finance as entailed by the name. And this internship was actually, it was a fellowship, not an internship. It was sponsored by Princeton University. So I actually live in Princeton. So this is like a very nice opportunity back home. So Princeton University's Center for Information Technology Policy, CITP, this is actually the first time they offered a PIT SF, so a Public Interest Technology Summer Fellowship. They wanted to combine technology, policy, philosophy, law, and at the center of it all, ethics. And so they wanted to get a bunch of students from across, it's known as the PIT-UN, the Public Interest Technology University Network. CMU is part of this, and a bunch of other universities like Stanford, Georgetown, UChicago, Yale. There were a bunch of students from those universities as well. And we were all gathered to learn more about public interest technology for about a week or so. And then we were sent off to government agencies. So my friends went to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. Some of them went to the AI office at the New York City Mayor's office. And I went to the CFPB along with one of my friends from Stanford. So I worked on fair lending models. So there's two aspects to this. First, fairness. So I worked on specifically fairness in machine learning, which is a novel field that looks to combine humanitarian ethics with machine learning models. And this was specifically in the realm of credit scoring. So think about like Equifax and other places where you get your credit score. They were looking into what kind of variables go into what determines someone's creditworthiness and whether or not there's some potential fairness and disparity issues here. And I'll explain more on the next slide. Yeah, so my work consisted of a bunch of machine learning. So obviously it was Python based, and there was a couple of visualization aspects, but most of my work was done with this open source toolkit called FairLearn, which is developed by Microsoft Research. And its job is to assess and mitigate potential biases in machine learning models. And then we also had to use this toolkit called SHAP. So SHAP represents an implementation of Shapley values, which are this sort of game theory based idea that explains how much a variable impacts the model. So this is kind of a cute picture depicting how like models are usually black boxes. And so what SHAP does is that it tries to explain how much each variable, so it quantifies the specific impact a variable has on a model's output. And this can be very important for credit worthiness, because if you're making someone's credit if you're making the basis for offering someone's credit, say their race or their gender, that's very problematic. And that's specifically what we were trying to look into. And on the right is kind of my pet project from the internship. So since it was remote, we were obviously on a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of meetings. And so when my time wasn't spent in those, I tried to read up on fair ML in general. And I kind of compiled my knowledge in this sort of mini dissertation paper style thing that is kind of my way of showing what I did in the internship, because much of what I did in the project is extremely confidential because it is a federal government agency. So I just wanted to show what I had done in my own time. And I thought that exploring the literature was a really cool aspect. And I'll explain more about why I did this and why I think it's really important in the next slide. Yeah, so a couple of advice. People are your friends. So a bunch of my free time was spent in like coffee chats, which I thought were really cool. But I think the basis behind them was really important. So it was like finding people who had at times like completely random interests. Like there was this time when all of the interns at the CFPB, so not just from my specific fellowship, but all of their interns, so like 70 or so undergrad, graduates, and PhD students, were in a meeting with the director of the CFPB, the former director now because the administration changed, Kathy Kreninger. And so I think she kind of has similar powers to like the Speaker of the House or the Senate Majority Leader, except she's for the CFPB. She's the head of the CFPB. And so I remember she was waiting for people to ask questions. And I ended up talking about CS with the head of a federal agency for about like 15 minutes. And it was super cool because she also had a computer science background and no one knew this. And so it was a really interesting way to see how this incredibly technical background led her to one of the most powerful positions in a federal government agency. And I think that that's kind of the background for what makes a really nice coffee chat, is finding a way to see some common interests and then see how the person you're talking with developed that in their field and is exploring that in their own personal way, because there's a lot to be learned and it's so much better when you learn it from someone rather than reading it. So kind of relating to the second point, time is definitely not your friend. Even though my internship it did last 10 weeks, the first 3 weeks were spent trying to figure out how to use the CFPB's laptop from like the 1970s, because the United States government is pretty slow. But I guess the moral of this point is that there's really no way to know how much time you have at an internship because meetings fly by, projects fly by. And so really taking advantage of those, even 15-minute coffee chats, you don't know what'll happen for further on down the line. And this exactly goes to my final point. Just because the internship is over doesn't mean you have to stop. So what I really liked about my internship is that I found the field that I eventually want to pursue as a full-time career, which is fair machine learning, after going to this internship. So immediately after it finished, I took the paper that I wrote and basically spammed all of CMU's ML, HCI, CS faculty looking for research positions, trying to explore fairness in machine learning. And obviously it's a CS related field, so CMU was like stacked with professors to reach out to. So one really nice thing was that after meeting with them and discussing my interest and passion for this field, 3 professors actually allowed me to lead a team, which I've currently been doing for the past semester and the next 2 semesters, I assume, in fair machine learning. So this is kind of the beginning of my story, I think, and it all happened because of the time I took in the internship to just sit back, talk to people, read up on things, because that's kind of an ongoing process. So up until now, this break, I've had the goal of reading about a paper a day in the literature and talking with people. So much of where the project is headed right now is trying to connect with machine learning people all over the globe. So I currently have meetings this week and next week talking with people in India, Africa, in the UK, all about these really cool topics that spurred directly from a random internship that I found close to home. So it's all about, I think, making use of time. And the best part I learned from this internship was that the time that you have, if it's spent well, then there's really no telling how far you can go. Because if you had told me that 3 of the top HCI professors would have allowed me to lead a team not 2 weeks after finishing an internship, I wouldn't have believed it. So I'm happy to talk about research, and I will put my email in the chat if you guys want to ask me any questions related to that. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Manish. And finally, we have Jacob Felgoys. Jacob, are you ready?
I am.
All right, thank you.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Jacob. I am a senior. You can see my majors listed on the screen there. I'm going to focus a little bit more on my research interests, though, which are science and technology policy, economics, particularly innovation and productivity, and also U.S.-China relations. And right now, I'm focusing a lot on competition for undergraduate talent between our 2 countries. Next slide. So this past summer, I was an intern at the U.S. House of Representatives, the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. And I'm going to just give you a little bit of a background on what that means. So the House of Representatives has a series of committees, and each committee has a different jurisdiction. So they are essentially responsible for conducting oversight over a variety of federal agencies. For example, the CFPB. The jurisdiction for the science committee, where I was at, they are in charge of the National Science Foundation, NASA, NIST, which is the National Institute for Science and Technology, very cool organization. They set standards. And also OSTP, which is the White House's Office of Science and Technology Policy. And also the committee has additional jurisdiction over research and development activities across the US government, including at the Department of Energy, the Environmental Protection Agency, NOAA, a couple other agencies as well. And so what does a committee do? They have a couple of main activities. Maybe the biggest one is conducting hearings. So when a committee holds a hearing, basically they invite experts, they invite government leaders to come and speak about maybe the research they're doing, if it's a professor, or what progress an agency is making in terms of the deliverables that Congress has set out for it. And these hearings often lead to legislation, which is written by the committee's professional staff. And these are full-time positions, people whose responsibility is essentially to be an expert in kind of a broad policy space, and to determine what issues might exist in the different agencies that their committee is responsible for overseeing. So, for example, the House Science Committee, just before I joined, they had just put out this big bill on artificial intelligence, and that was the product of a number of years work looking at the deficiencies in AI at the NSF and OSTP and NIST. So they put forward legislation, and they also conduct other oversight activities, like, for example, investigating companies that might be out of compliance with federal law, or looking into bills that are relevant to the committee that might have been put forward by other House members. And so my work while I was at the committee was primarily to take notes on a bunch of different events that were going on. Some of them were in Congress, many of them were outside, so different think tanks and stakeholders. Everything was virtual, so pretty much the world was at our fingertips there. And then each of the interns, we were responsible for writing 2-pagers based on some of these events. So we picked events that we thought were relevant and interesting to us, and we did more research, and we converted them into a concise document, sort of outlining here are the issues of the day when it comes to nuclear space technology, for example. And I also worked on a couple of smaller projects with different committee staffers, where I was researching legislation, investigating companies, in ways that were relevant to the committee's interests. All right, last slide. And so some advice for you if you're thinking about trying to find a government internship, or if you're just interested in work in government. When you're applying for an internship in government, really think long and hard about your personal and professional network. So think about maybe the professors that your friends, your family. Even if those people don't have people in government who they can directly connect you with, then they might have an idea of agencies that you should consider applying to. There's so much in the federal government, and that's not even talking about the state governments, that it's really impossible to find all of the opportunities that might be a good fit for you, which means that there's just so much out there. So keep an open mind, talk to as many people as you can. And if you have a particular agency in mind, then try talking to someone who's worked there before, because each part of the government has a different culture and a different priority, I'll say. So they might prioritize people with certain kinds of skills over others. And that's not necessarily something that you're going to see on a job description, but would still be incredibly valuable to you when you're writing up a cover letter. Once you're in a government internship, work hard, show that you're passionate about the subject, which, if you found a good internship, then hopefully you will be. But, take time to be a person, and don't let your work totally consume you. Enjoy the experience. Try to connect on a personal level with the other interns in your office, for example. And sort of an extension of that, build your network. So be curious. Get to know people who are maybe outside your field of expertise. Try to expand your knowledge base. Maybe you'll find something exciting that you want to pursue once you're done, and that would be wonderful. And finally, ask for recommendations. And I don't mean letters of recommendation, though you might do that too, but ask for other people to talk to. Ask for resources, life tips, movies that they found interesting, books. If you pretty much any place you go is going to be fascinating, full of fascinating people, and just take advantage of that, and learn the things that they know. And part of that is getting recommendations. All right, that's it from me.
All right, well, thank you so much, Jacob. And to all of the panelists, it's really good to see that every organization is really providing you with meaningful, robust work. So it's really great to see that. And so, yes, thank you for your time, your expertise. Luckily, we do have about 12, 15 minutes left to turn over to our attendees for questions within the chat box. And so to get us started, I'll prompt the first question. Maybe we'll go back to Adriana and Michelle to answer this question. But before we do, just as a reminder for our panelists, feel free to share your email in the chat box. And both Kevin and I, we all encourage you to connect with each other, follow up with additional questions. But yeah, so to start us off with our first Q&A question for Adriana and Michelle, I'm really curious with Blizzard Entertainment and Google, of course, these are very competitive organizations. Many students want to work there, of course. So what was your best advice, or maybe a different question, your strategy for really standing out? Did you find a particular person or resource really helpful for helping you break through that competition? What do you think about that, Adriana?
Yeah, so something I didn't mention while I was speaking is that I did my interviews at the Grace Hopper Celebration Conference, which is this conference for women in STEM, essentially. So it was really nice because there's all of these events, and you get to hear about different speakers and all of the work that they're doing. So it was really nice that they were able to accommodate my interview times during the conference, so they were there in person. Unfortunately, that's not really going to happen in the next couple of months, but I had them in person, and I was able to do them like right after one another. So I didn't have too much time to like overthink or to analyze everything that went wrong or that went right. So I had them right after each other. And I think that was really neat because you have a common interest, since me and the person who was interviewing were both at this conference, so we could talk about, oh, what did you think of this speaker? What did you think of like the opening ceremony? Just like have common points to talk about, which I think really helped me and helped me stand out, because it's not just like we're speaking to each other and we're both robots. It's like we both have something to talk about. So I think that's been really helpful. You don't have to attend a conference, you just have to find some common interest so you could know that you're a person and have share more than just you wanting to work there. So I think that's one of my strategies, is to try to build a relationship with your interviewer or the recruiter, just so they could get to know you a little bit more than just what's on your resume.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Adriana. I mean, if you give the employers a reason to remember you on a human level, those stories and connections are really impactful. So, great advice. Michelle, any additional thoughts about breaking through the competition? How were you noticed?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So actually during my internships, I was able to talk to my recruiter and kind of see what she looks for when she's going through all these resumes and portfolios. And when she looks at resumes, what she said was really interesting is if people have like personal passion projects that are related to, doesn't have to be games, like entertainment in general, and also show those projects on your portfolio. For example, a lot of people that work at Blizzard might do side projects related to like creating their own games or things like that. And I think the second thing that really helped to be competitive was the preparation involved of applying. So before applying, I interviewed with a lot of other companies, and that was really good practice to get feedback about maybe some of my weaknesses that I could improve on, both in my portfolio and resume, and continually keep polishing that up until I applied to Blizzard. So those are the main two things I think really helped.
Thanks. And I have some follow-ups to Joe's excellent question. And this is Michelle and Adriana, that could be really anybody, specifically probably about technical interviews or design interviews, like Michelle had. I got a lot of students asking, how can I best prepare for tech interviews or design-based interviews? Any tips you can provide, like anything that you found to be particularly effective in getting ready for a tech interview? Either one.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. So what I did specifically this semester, since now I'm a senior, so I was starting to look for full-time jobs, is I really just started grinding on the Leet Code and all of those hacker and coding challenges types of platforms. They're a pain, and it took me a long time to get motivated and to really just like suck it up. Like the more you do it, the more you get better. But what I ended up finding super helpful is doing them with a friend. If you're feeling really rocky, like, oh, I haven't practiced these data structures since like my sophomore year, if you're feeling really unconfident like I was, because to be fair, I hadn't thought about like a linked list since I took my data structures class. Things like that. So practicing with a friend, and even just like talking about like the coding problem that you're facing, it's really helpful just to get your feet wet, to start getting in the mindset of like, okay, these are going to be timed. If this is particularly for like software engineering, these are going to be timed. I'm going to have to essentially find a working solution pretty quickly, to just kind of practice and do that, and do it with a friend. Because if you can't think of the solution right away, maybe they might be able to think about it, and you'll be able to motivate each other better.
That's great advice. That's great. Michelle, anything with design that you could add to that?
Yeah, so I think for design, it's different because it's something that you really have to evolve your skill set, and it's not something where there's like a definite answer. Design is such an ambiguous field, and what you really have to do, I think, is start off small and maybe do like side projects and really understand the general design process. And once you go deeper into it, you get the hang of it, and you develop your own way of going through designing, from research and talking to people about a problem that you might be solving, to actually using design tools. Like you might have your own design tools that you like. And so I think echoing Adriana, practice, I think, is a really important part of designing, and getting a lot of perspective from, if you can talk to like design professors and TAs and other design students, I feel like that has really helped.
Great. It sounds like with both of you, it's a process of thinking out loud, right? It's practicing just talking through things, and letting somebody in on the way you solve problems, or the way you go about designing, and being comfortable with articulating that. It's helpful. Great advice. Thank you.
And we also had a direct question for Adriana from our audience here. Specifically, what coding practice platforms, such as LeetCode, do you find most helpful or recommend using?
Yes. So there's a couple. I can answer that one directly in the chat, because I want to do some thinking around a couple of links that I found helpful. So I'll just send that right in the chat. But that's a good question.
Thank you. And another question too, we still have a few minutes here. For our other panelists that are here today, Jacob, Manish, Juliette, when you think about all the options you have available to you as CMU students, I'm assuming maybe a few of you had multiple offers, or maybe you have in the past. So can you maybe speak to your method or recommendation for how you chose between different options, or even different offers that you did have? Anybody want to speak to that?
Sure. I got some really great advice from someone at a previous internship, actually, about kind of how to deal with this. And this kind of applies not just to, when you have multiple offers for an internship, but when you're kind of considering, what you want to do maybe for a full-time job. And it's a way of thinking. So instead of thinking of it as, oh, I'm trying to pick the best option between these two internships, think about it instead as, are any of these options going to close doors for me? And if not, then it probably doesn't matter so much. Like try to, ideally, you'll find a place that makes you happiest, and where you enjoy the work more. But that's really hard to know going into it sometimes. So what I would do is instead think about, are any of these internships going to close doors for me? Which ones might open the most doors? And if you're kind of deadlocked between two options, then maybe that can help break the tie.
Yeah, great advice. Thank you.
I can speak next.
Yeah, thanks, Juliette. What do you
So,
think?
I think something that's really important to me is company culture. So whenever I go to interviews and they ask if I have any questions, I try to ask questions that are related to company culture. So seeing if they collaborate or if they kind of just work by themselves, seeing like, I guess just like how friendly everyone is, how different teams interact, how people in different positions interact, stuff like that is really important to me. So kind of like seeing what is a good fit for you is something that's really important. Another thing would just be figuring out what kind of skills you'd learn through the internship program. I think it's really important for you to learn and grow throughout your internship. So not like ask them what kind of tech stack they use or what kind of knowledge that you should know before you start the internship is something that's super important too.
Yeah, I'll just go in and add something as well. So kind of an unorthodox answer, but I think that a lot of times there's a like internship or bust mentality, and I think that's somewhat misleading because at least in my opinion, I think research has been the most valuable thing in my academic career for the sole reason that research offers an open-ended problem, which is something that's very different to what you learn in your regular classes. But I think like a combination of what Jacob's advice was, which is like the whole thinking about what might close doors. I think research is the easiest way to open a lot of doors because when you're researching with a professors at CMU, it's undoubtedly going to increase both your network, but also your capacity to learn because you're going with quite possibly one of the top people in the field and you're looking at how they work and what kind of people they talk to and how they are in meetings and how they write papers and how they conduct research. So these are all really valuable skills. Plus, if you end up doing research in an area that you really like, there is no telling how many connections you might get, which will lead to an internship. So I think that even if you don't get an offer or even interviews, like for me personally, I don't have anything lined up for this summer, but because of my research work, I don't want to call it a fallback, but I have something that I can rely upon to continue working with these professors. So it's always nice to, I think, look broader picture and really understand that if you're at CMU, chances are you'll find something to do, and that will lead you to whatever it is you want to go into, whether it's an internship or research full time.
All right, very good. Well, excellent advice. Thank you so much again to all of our panelists for your wisdom, your time, your talents, and to our attendees as well for being here today. As a reminder, I know this session went pretty quick today, so please do continue the conversation. Everybody included their email addresses within the chat box, and also through Handshake, as Kevin mentioned earlier, you are welcome to schedule through Handshake an appointment with your career consultant to talk about internship searching, all the job fairs that are coming up in the next few weeks. So continue that preparation along the way. Yeah. Other thoughts from you, Kevin? Any words of advice from here?
No, again, this was fantastic. I learned things from this. It's always great to learn from students about what they did, just tips, and there was some just great insider kind of information that everybody picked up. So thanks so much to the panelists. Thank all the students for attending, and best of luck in your search. Again, not to keep saying this, but stay in touch with us. CPDC can definitely help you in your search.
All right. Take care. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.